Hello.
Hey,
Hi, this is Dale Stanton calling in.
we were actually just talking about your book just a moment ago, A Hooker's Daughter. So can you give us just a little insight on that story and what made you decide to write it?
Absolutely. One question I have for you before I begin is I'm on speakerphone. Is it difficult for you to hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you. And am I speaking to Rodney?
This is Rob. That's fine. R-O-B.
Call him whatever you want,
No,
though.
but Rodney's
Okay.
good. I've been called Rodney and Ronald all my life. But R-O-B, Rob.
Okay, Rob. Lovely. Anyway, the question is, why did I decide to write this book?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I wanted to show that one can triumph over antisocial events in their lives. And my mother was a hooker, and my sister came out gay 60 years ago before it was fashionable. They put her in a mental institution and then a convent initially. And then through the years, there were all kinds of events going on, stolen car ring, et cetera, et cetera. And I was subject to all this, and I wanted to show in my book that I was able to overcome and love and forgive and actually rise to what I want to consider triumph.
Now, I want to know how exactly did you figure out as a little girl that what mom did and who these guys were that were coming in and out of the house? How did you what age did you kind of figure that out?
Well, I was about 6 years old and we lived in an apartment, and I answered the door, and there were different men there at the end of the hallway, and my mother did much of her activity at the home as well as on the outside, and I don't know that I could have defined it as well as I could have as an adult, but I certainly knew that things were really awry and that this was not the right thing to go. Then, of course, the police came to the house on an occasion, and various activities that I speak about in the book that went on that it was very clear. And children basically were not allowed to play with me. They were taken away from me, and even the Girl Scouts asked me to leave.
Wow. And you said your sister was gay. Did you know, like, when you were a kid, did you know exactly, did you notice signs like, my sister's a little bit different, like she doesn't play with dolls or do
Well, I
anything?
was very close to my sister because in many ways she was leading the way. Again, things weren't right at home. I was only 9 years old, and she was 16, and she came out, and she had a very masculine persona. She dressed very male. She's kind of a big gal at that time, and it was very harsh. And eventually she ran away from home, and even though my mother had her own activities and events going on, my mother felt very bad about it and set out having private detectives find her because it was such an aberration from what we knew as a society in those days. And when they did find her, as I just mentioned before, they did place her in a convent, and then the court mandated her to go to a mental institution for observation. And that's what they did in those days. It's not like today with gay pride parade and everybody, marriages and things. It was just like, what's wrong here? So that was a big trauma, and of course, I didn't see much of my sister for the next 20 years thereafter because she basically lived on the streets for a while, became homeless, and had to struggle with her own demons until finally she lifted herself up through the bootstraps as well. So we saw each other, but not a lot, and there wasn't a really common denominator. We were each struggling with our own pathways of what we were going to do and how we were going to survive sort of the rejections and discriminations of life.
Like she had to be really, really courageous to come out at that, way back then. I mean, we just passed a gay marriage law here in Maryland, like in November, and this was.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me give you the math. My sister is 76 years old. She was 16, so that was 60 years ago.
Wow. I could not even imagine somebody trying to come out out of the closet way back then. Like, even now, it's still difficult for a child to tell their parent that. But I can only imagine back then, before Ellen, before Anderson Cooper, before all these other, major figures that we have that have come out and kind of made it okay, and where it's almost not a big deal anymore. Before, what was the show?
That's correct.
Right.
And plus her persona, because she was looking for her identity and, needed to make her own statement. And she, had the extreme DA cut of those days. And as I say, typically in a bomber jacket and hanging out at gay clubs and whatever. And she had a very tough go for herself.
Wow. And I love your Boston accent, by the way. I can hear it a little bit.
Oh, yes, my Boston accent, thank you. Yes, that's correct.
I thought I heard "ka"
actually,
or something like that.
Currently, I'm sitting in Arizona, and I might have, when we communicated, I was on a book tour for this book in Florida, and it was just such a heartening and wonderful experience to be so well received. I had 13 different bookings there.
Now, some other things happened once you got a little bit older. There was something with your husband. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
About what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
I think you went through something with your husband as you got a little bit older?
Yes, that's correct. I basically wanted to escape, and in those days, women ran into marriages, and he had issues of his own, and he was not well, and then he got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and his prognosis was 2 months to 2 years, and I was so busy at that point just wanting to be normal and fade into the community, like being just a lovely little housewife with children. Anyway, the roof came falling in on us, and he actually suffered for 6.5 years, very difficult years, and he was also a juvenile diabetic, and he went blind from his diabetes and various other problems that he had a very difficult time. So in that process, our world was again upside down in terms of what went on in the household and the children and the sadness of him going through what he did, and all of us, basically.
So when exactly, after all of this stuff happened, did you decide, I'm going to put this to pen and paper and make this a book and turn this tragedy into triumph and make something out of it?
Well, I was writing the book in my head my whole life because I knew that the circumstances were quite different than most people's lives. However, I really didn't act on it. I was struggling in my own earlier years to find my own identity, and hopefully I began to empower myself more and more. Eventually, I decided I had concealed it from my children, basically, that now when they were in their late teens, that it was time for them to know all the history. So I basically wrote it for them, never envisioning that I was going to put it out there at all or beyond them having it. But I had been so encouraged by a group of people that had read it, within an inner circle, and then my husband was very instrumental in the process. He says, you just can't put this in the drawer. It is so commanding, and also very the transparency. And so that's how it came to be.
All right, so if somebody wants to buy the book, like where do they need to go and how can they pick it up?
Okay, well, thanks for asking. First of all, they can go to my website, which is www.thehookersdaughter.com. And on that website, there's no apostrophe for the hookers. It's just all one word. And that's available. I can sign them and send it to them. They can order it right through the website, or any book clubs or anybody that wants to read it for that purpose. It can also be purchased on Amazon. It can be purchased from Infinity Publishing, who is the publisher of the book. And for those tablet readers, like on Nook and Kindle and Smashwords and all that, Apple, it's available. They just have to go about and load it onto their instruments. And the price of the book is $15. And again, if anybody goes to my website, I'll be happy to sign it and anything they want it to be.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us. Definitely want to make sure people grab that book. It's at thehookersdaughter.com. That's the website?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
And I just want to say, anybody that reads it, and if they choose to write me their thoughts, I so enjoy hearing that from people, and as I have in the past from So many people have contacted me, many people whom I didn't even know or barely knew, and they found that they could identify with some of the issues in their lives of different issues, but hearing all kinds of things that happened to them. So, as I said earlier, the transparency really resonated with them.
All right. Well, we appreciate you sharing your story with us. I'm definitely going to try to get the book, and I want a signed copy too. And I may write you some feedback, or if once I do get it.
Okay, I would so appreciate that. And most of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity for being on your broadcast today, and wishing you and all those associated today with it for a happy, healthy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dale Stanton, everybody.
Okay.
All right. Oh, wow, that was a lot of.